While men bled and died, the Hatfield-McCoy women were secretly orchestrating the murders. But why did history erase their bloodiest acts? The Tugfork River didn't care much about state lines when it carved its way through the Appalachian Mountains. Neither did the families living along its muddy banks. On one side you had West Virginia, on the other, Kentucky. But for the Hatfields and McCoys, those borders meant about as much as a fence made of smoke. Both clans had been scratching out lives in these mountains for generations. The land was tough, unforgiving, and beautiful in a way that could break your heart or your back, sometimes both on the same day. Dense forests stretched for miles, hiding secrets, stills, and eventually a whole lot of blood. These weren't city folk worried about fancy manners or proper tea service. These were mountain people who measured wealth in livestock, land, and how many sons could handle a rifle. Leading the Hatfield clan was William Anderson Hatfield, though everybody called him Devil Anse. The nickname wasn't exactly a compliment to his Sunday school attendance. Devil Anse stood tall, wore his beard long, and had eyes that could size up a man's worth faster than a county tax assessor. He commanded respect through sheer presence and wasn't shy about backing up his words with action. Then there's Randolph McCoy, known as Ol' Ronald, to folks who knew him well enough to risk the familiarity. Ronald was every bit as stubborn as Devil Anse, maybe more so. He had 13 children, which tells you something about his determination in all aspects of life. Both men shared that particular mountain trait of never backing down from a fight, even when backing down might have been the smarter play. But the real trouble started brewing when the Civil War came knocking. Most folks in these mountains sided with the Confederacy. It felt natural, fighting against a government that seemed as distant as the moon. Devil Anse himself led Confederate guerrilla fighters, quick and deadly as mountain cats. The McCoys mostly followed the same path, except for one problem: Asa Harmon McCoy. Asa decided to march with the Union Army instead. Now family disagreements over politics are one thing when they happen around a dinner table. There's something else entirely when your neighbor's son is literally shooting at your boy across a battlefield. Asa's choice didn't just create tension, it carved a fault line right through the community. When Asa came home from the war, he found a world that had shifted beneath his feet. Former neighbors looked at him sideways. Old friendships had curdled into suspicion. And wouldn't you know it, Asa ended up dead not long after returning, shot by unknown attackers while recovering from a broken leg. The mountains had always been hard on folks, but now they were getting downright dangerous. Old grudges mixed with wartime hatred like gunpowder and sparks. Land disputes that might have been settled with harsh words and maybe a shove or two suddenly carried the weight of life and death. Every slight felt bigger. Every disagreement cut deeper. What nobody realized yet was how the women caught in the middle would shape everything that came next. While the men grabbed headlines with their guns and grudges, the real backbone of these feuding families wore aprons and carried secrets. Hatfield and McCoy women didn't just sit by their fireplaces waiting for news. They ran entire households, managed farms, and somehow kept their children fed while bullets flew overhead. These mountain women had skills that would make today's multitaskers jealous. One day they'd be milking cows at dawn, the next they'd be sneaking through forests carrying coded messages between family members. Makes sense, right? Who'd suspect a woman with a basket of eggs of plotting revenge? Then there's the fascinating case of Nancy McCoy, who basically committed the ultimate act of rebellion by marrying into enemy territory. When she wed John C. Hatfield, it wasn't just a love story, it was practically treason. Her own McCoy relatives treated her like she'd joined a foreign army. But Nancy wasn't the only woman willing to risk everything for matters of the heart. Rosanna McCoy took things even further. This young woman fell head over heels for the same John C. Hatfield, and their scandalous affair became mountain gossip for decades. She didn't just cross family lines, she obliterated them. The weird part is how her forbidden romance actually escalated the entire feud. Family honor meant everything in Appalachian culture, and Rosanna had trampled all over it. But let's not forget the widows who wielded the real power behind closed doors. Martha McCoy, after losing her husband Asa during the Civil War, became something of a legal mastermind. She understood that winning this feud required more than just faster guns. Land disputes, inheritance claims, court battles. Martha orchestrated these moves like a chess grandmaster. Her quiet influence shaped legal strategies that would eventually reach the highest courts in America. Well, not every woman chose the subtle approach. Some Hatfield and McCoy women discovered that sometimes you needed to fight fire with fire, They learned to load rifles, hide weapons, and protect their homes when the menfolk were away seeking vengeance. Mountain life had always been tough, but the feud pushed these women into roles their grandmothers never imagined. The most heartbreaking stories involve the mothers trying to shield their children from a war that seemed to have no end. Every knock at the door could bring terrible news. Every strange sound at night might signal another raid. These women lived in constant fear while maintaining the appearance of normal family life and the humor in all this chaos. Some women became expert rumor spreaders, turning gossip into psychological warfare. A whispered conversation at the general store could spark the next round of violence. Information became their weapon of choice, and boy did they know how to use it. What makes these women truly remarkable isn't just their survival, it's how they adapted and evolved during impossible circumstances. They transformed from traditional mountain wives into strategic thinkers, negotiators, and sometimes warriors themselves. Their courage would soon be tested in ways that would make their earlier sacrifices seem small, because when the feud exploded into its most violent phase, these women would face choices that would haunt the mountains for generations. When Devil Anse Hatfield's men came for Sally McCoy that cold January night, they probably didn't expect her to fight back. But these weren't ordinary mountain women. These were survivors who'd already weathered war, poverty, and years of bloodshed. Sally heard the horses first, then the shouting. Her husband Randolph was already dead, shot down months earlier in the feud's escalating violence. Now they wanted her sons. She grabbed her children and ran barefoot through the snow as flames consumed everything she'd built. The Hatfields thought burning down her cabin would end things. Instead, it created their worst nightmare, a furious mountain woman with nothing left to lose. But Sally wasn't alone in taking up arms. Across the holler, other women were making their own desperate choices. Two Hatfield women, relatives of young Ellison Mounts, turned their homes into makeshift hospitals during raids. They stitched bullet wounds by candlelight and hid wounded men in root cellars when posses came hunting. And the weird part is, some of these women were treating enemies from both sides of the feud. Then there's the story nobody talks about much. Several McCoy and Hatfield women started carrying loaded pistols in their apron pockets, not just for show, for real protection. Mary Hatfield once chased off 3 McCoy men with nothing but a shotgun and some very colorful language that would make a preacher blush. These ladies knew that in the mountains, being defenseless meant being dead. Poor Rosanna McCoy learned this lesson the hardest way possible. After her scandalous affair with John Hatfield, both families turned their backs on her. The Hatfields saw her as a McCoy spy. Her own McCoy relatives called her a traitor. She ended up living like a ghost between two worlds, carrying a small derringer everywhere she went. Makes sense, right? When your love story puts a target on your back, you better learn to shoot straight. Well, if you think the women were just defending themselves, you'd be wrong. Some actively escalated the violence. Martha McCoy became the feud's unofficial intelligence network, spreading rumors faster than wildfire. She'd whisper that Devil Anse was planning another raid, or that certain McCoy men were plotting revenge. Whether these stories were true didn't matter much. Fear travels faster than facts in isolated mountain communities. Let's not forget that these women understood something the men missed. Information was more powerful than bullets. They'd visit neighboring families for social calls, but really they were gathering intelligence. Who had new guns? Which men seemed nervous? What routes did the other family use for travel? This informal spy network kept both clans one step ahead of total annihilation. The violence was spinning completely out of control by now. Midnight raids became routine, ambushes happened in broad daylight. Both sides were arming for what felt like an all-out war, but the worst was yet to come. Soon one terrible night would change everything, and the women would face their greatest test of survival and strength. January 1st, 1888, the McCoy family was settling in for the night when hell came knocking at their door. The Hatfields, fueled by moonshine and years of rage, surrounded Sally McCoy's cabin like wolves circling prey. What happened next would forever change how people saw this mountain feud. The attackers set fire to the house. Sally watched her world burn as she clutched her children, flames licking at the walls around them. Her daughter Olifair tried to run, but caught a bullet in the back, dead at 16. Sally's son Calvin took a shot to the head. The woman who had already buried her husband now held 2 dying children in her arms, while her home turned to ash. But here's the thing about mountain women. They don't break easy. Sally McCoy could have crawled into a corner and given up. Instead, she did something that shocked everyone. She became a legal warrior. This was 1888. Remember, women couldn't vote, couldn't serve on juries, and most couldn't even testify in court without their husband's permission. Sally didn't care about any of that nonsense. She marched herself to the authorities and demanded justice. Not the mountain kind with guns and midnight raids, but real courthouse justice. People thought she'd lost her mind. A widow woman taking on the most powerful family in the mountains through lawyers and judges instead of bullets. Well, Sally had the last laugh. Meanwhile, across the river, Hatfield women faced their own nightmare. Their men were being hunted like animals. Vicey Hatfield watched bounty hunters drag her husband Devil Anse into hiding. The woman had raised 13 children in these mountains, and now she might lose everything to courtrooms and gallows. Then there's Martha McCoy, Asa's widow, who turned out to be sharper than a serpent's tooth when it came to legal battles. She understood something the gun-toting men missed entirely. Real power didn't come from who could shoot fastest, it came from who could work the system smartest. Martha started digging through land deeds, court records, and property disputes going back decades. She found loopholes, missing signatures, and questionable transactions that made lawyers' heads spin. The woman turned detective work into an art form, building cases that would eventually reach the highest courts in the land. But the tragedy kept piling up. Ellison Mounts, barely more than a boy, faced execution for his role in the New Year's massacre. His female relatives pleaded for mercy, but mountain justice demanded blood. The hangman's rope claimed another life, while mothers wept. Rosanna McCoy, still caught between the families she'd tried to bridge, watched it all crumble. Her love affair with John C. Hatfield had started this latest round of violence, and the guilt was eating her alive. She'd become a ghost of herself, wandering between two worlds that wanted nothing to do with her. The courtroom battles were just beginning, though. What these mountain women accomplished next would surprise everyone, including themselves. Sometimes the strongest warriors don't carry guns. Today, drive through Kentucky or West Virginia, and you'll find something remarkable. Hatfield and McCoy descendants aren't hiding from their bloody past, they're celebrating it. And guess who's leading the charge? The women. Every year, thousands gather for the Hatfield-McCoy Reunion Festival. The event that started as a small family gathering now draws visitors from across the country. These aren't bitter enemies meeting on neutral ground. They're families sharing barbecue, swapping stories, and laughing about their infamous ancestors. The organizing committees, run mostly by great-great-granddaughters, who treat the whole thing like planning the world's most interesting family reunion. Sarah McCoy Patterson heads the Historical Preservation Society in Pike County. She's Randolph McCoy's great-great-granddaughter, and she spends her days giving tours to curious tourists. People expect us to still be shooting at each other, she jokes. Instead, we're usually arguing about who makes better cornbread. Her counterpart on the Hatfield side, Linda Hatfield Morrison, runs a genealogy research center that helps people trace their mountain roots. Together, they've probably done more for regional tourism than any government program. But here's the weird part. These women haven't just made peace with the past. They've weaponized it for good. The Hatfield-McCoy Trail System, a massive ATV and hiking network, brings millions of dollars to communities that struggled economically for generations. Local women turned their ancestors' battlegrounds into adventure destinations. Makes sense, right? If your great-great-grandmother survived midnight raids and burning houses, organizing tourism seems pretty manageable. Then there's the educational angle that nobody saw coming. Schools across Appalachia use the feud as a teaching tool about conflict resolution. Students learn how Sally McCoy channeled her grief into legal action rather than revenge. How Martha McCoy proved that persistence in court beats bullets in the long run. These aren't just history lessons, they're blueprints for handling modern disputes. The entertainment industry can't get enough of these mountain women either. Every few years, another movie or TV series resurrects the feud. But recent productions focus more on the female perspectives than the traditional shoot-'em-up narrative. Rosanna McCoy's tragic love story gets the romantic drama treatment. Sally McCoy's survival becomes an action thriller. Even Nancy McCoy's controversial marriage gets explored as a tale of personal choice versus family loyalty. Well, the real legacy isn't in Hollywood anyway. Visit the family cemeteries scattered across the Tug Fork Valley. You'll find fresh flowers on graves over a century old. Someone still remembers these women. Someone still honors their sacrifices. The descendants understand something their ancestors couldn't see through all that gunpowder smoke. The women who survived the feud weren't just casualties of male pride, they were the ones who eventually ended it. Their stories of endurance, clever maneuvering, and quiet strength became the foundation for reconciliation. The Hatfield-McCoy feud may have been America's deadliest family conflict, but it produced something unexpected, a generation of mountain women who refused to let hatred define their legacy.